How do debt collectors decide when to sue?
When I was working as a collector, when we got the case, I was of the approach of, I'm not wasting my time making phone calls or doing anything. We were just going to sue right away. Because like I said, I took the approach of, let's just get to it, right? Let's force them to make a decision whether they're not going to respond and we get a default judgment, or they are going to respond and then I can engage them in settlement discussions. With other collectors that I've seen, if it gets to the point where, okay, these phone calls, these letters obviously aren't working, now it's time to sue. What I do see though too is if they don't really have a good case, right? This especially happens with third-party debt collectors, junk debt buyers. They don't have the documentations they need. Sometimes they'll just keep pestering you and not file the lawsuit because they know that they're not going to be able to prove it in court. So they'll just bug you until you pay. Sometimes as a debtor, it can be tough dealing with all these phone calls and letters. And one thing you can do is send a debt verification letter or a stop collection letter. And, that kind of forces them into this, unless we can prove this, we've got to stop. So that's one tool. I know SoloSuit has a debt verification letter that people can use and send out. And I think that can be a really good tool if you're like, I just want them to leave me alone. Like, let's either move on to the lawsuit or they need to drop it. Like, that's a really good tool to force it into that process.
Yeah, I think the debt verification letter, we call it debt validation letter, but I think the terms are interchangeable.
Yeah.
But yeah, a debt validation letter is definitely a good tool, especially if there's any part of the debt that, you as a debtor think is invalid or you've got any questions about it. It can be a good way to make the collectors prove all aspects of the debt.
Yeah, and let me add too. I think sometimes people freak out about getting sued. They obviously don't know the process, right? It isn't always necessarily a bad thing for a debtor because it forces the other side to prove. Now you send a debt validation letter and they have to send back validation, right? Like the law's not exactly totally clear on exactly what is required for validation, right? So sometimes you think, well, they should have provided more proof than what they've sent. Maybe, a lot of times for like a credit card, it'll just be one statement that'll say past due amount, but it won't have all the past charges. They don't have the credit card agreement. But once you get into court, you can now do discovery requests to request specific documents that you think they should have. If they don't have them, now you can say, look, you don't have the proof that you need to prove this. So going to court is not necessarily a bad thing for a debtor either.
So you're saying it's not bad for a debtor to have to go to court? In what ways?
Well, it's not always bad, right? Like, and I know I'm giving like my lawyer answer there, right? Like I'll never say like anything is always something or not, but like if you can you get the debt validation letter and you say they don't have what they need to prove that I owe this debt, I don't think, and they're saying, yes, we do, so pay up. Well, you can't go back to them and say, well, send me this. You can ask, but they don't have to do it, right? To send those specific documents. So you get into court and now you've got these formal court processes where you can send a discovery request and say, I want to see the original signed contract, or I want to see the statements that show each individual purchase that I made. Or if it's a medical debt, I want to see the original invoice that shows, itemized all of the medical care. And they have to provide that stuff to you. And if they don't, now you can say, look, now I've gone through this process and I can prove that you don't have the documents you need to make me pay this debt. So I think as a debtor, you want to approach a debt collection lawsuit as this is not just their opportunity to prove that I owe, but it's my opportunity to prove that I don't.
I love that. That actually, I think, kind of leads into my next question, which is more in the realm of debt settlement. If you do owe a debt, specifically a medical debt, are your chances of settling better than if you owe other types of debt, like a credit card or maybe a personal loan or something like that? I
would say yes, just because of the nature of who the creditors are, right? These are healthcare providers that are out in the community. And I'll be honest, I had clients who would they'd come to me with these debts and we'd make like an initial attempt to collect and they would say, you know what, just drop this one. We don't want to be seen as like the unscrupulous debt collector in the community, right? Because they see themselves as they're providing a valuable service. They're providing healthcare to people in the community. And so, and then I would add on top of that, a lot of them would have programs like charity programs where it's like, okay, somebody who doesn't have money, we're just going to pay for their bill out of our charity program, right? So like definitely you've got an opportunity to settle medical debt, I think more than you would like a credit card or like a payday loan, something like that. Like those guys are in the business of getting you to pay them money. Medical providers are in the business of providing health care, right? So I just think they're more agreeable and amenable to reasonable settlements if you can prove that you can't pay. And I have a lot of clients and have dealt with a lot of medical providers that will also say, look, we will agree to lower this amount or drop it altogether, but we want you to provide verification that you don't have money, things like this. And then they would drop it. Now, as a debtor, you're kind of in the situation like, I don't really want to hand over my personal information, and you certainly have no obligation to do so. But these medical providers, they've still got to stay in business. So they would a lot of times request verification, and if that was provided, they would drop it. So I would, to answer your question, I guess, yes, while I can't say that's always true, a lot of times you can get better deals settling with medical providers than you can with like a credit card.